Welcome to the Flowered Path. Tonight I'll be talking with Dr. Anne Borik about the amazing Saint Sharbel. Before we get to our talk, though, let's check the news. Before I get to the story, I want to pre-apologize for my pronunciation. I'm going to do my best, but I'm unfamiliar with these names. Turkish earthquake survivor credits Virgin Mary for his survival. Basil Habkuk, a young Lebanese Catholic and father of two, had just arrived in Turkey when the 7.8 magnitude earthquake struck on February 6, 2023. Basil found himself beneath the rubble. He could hear his close friend, Elias El-Haddad, crying out for help, but was powerless to do anything. After a few short hours, he could no longer hear his friend. Habkuk explains, "I stayed under the rubble for 52 hours, becoming stuck in a block about 2 meters long and 40 centimeters wide. He found a plastic pipe and began hitting the debris in the hope of attracting rescuers. The evening of the second day, he was located, but rescue efforts were spent on a nearby individual crying out in pain. Though the rescue efforts did not reach him, Habkuk relied on his faith in the Virgin Mary to see him through the ordeal." He recounts, "When the rubble fell on me, I fell to the ground, crying out from the bottom of my heart, 'O Mary.' I continued to call the Virgin Mary for the next 40 seconds until the earthquake stopped. Then I prayed the rosary from under the rubble. God protected me, and the Virgin Mary did not leave me." Prayer gave Habkuk the will to resist despair. He was rescued by a Turkish security team 52 hours after he became trapped. Habkuk credits faith in the Virgin Mary for his rescue, not just his own, but that of his mother and village as well. In his home village, the people commonly make the sign of the cross when leaving the village, praying for Mary's protection. Habkuk's mother also has a strong love for Mary and the saints, praying daily at the shrine of Our Lady of Mantara. After hearing the news of the earthquake, Habkuk's mother prayed to Mary, promising that if her son returned to her safely, she would walk barefoot from the village to the shrine and enter the cave crawling with Habkuk. They made good on this promise upon his return, along with great fanfare from the villagers. According to tradition, the Lady of Mantara Shrine is the cave where the Virgin Mary waited for Jesus while he was preaching in Sidon, because Jewish women were not allowed in pagan villages. The Gospels testify to the coming of Christ to Sidon, where he healed the daughter of a Canaanite woman. Apparitions of Mary have been seen in the cave, and many children are baptized there to this day. News writers for the Flowered Path are patrons and friends of the show, Sarah and Kevin. Saint Sharbel Makhlouf was born May 8, 1828 in a small village in the mountains of Lebanon. His birth name was Yosef Makhlouf. In 1851, he started his first year as a novitiate in a Maronite monastery, pronouncing his vows of chastity, poverty, and obedience on November 1st, 1853, and taking Sharbel as his new name. On July 23rd, 1859, Sharbel Makhlouf was ordained a priest of the Maronite Rite of the Catholic Church. After living and working 15 years with his fellow monks, Sharbel was given permission to become a hermit in 1875. He would live in this manner, walking the path of the Hermit Fathers for 23 years. Following his death, great wonders and miracles would be attributed to the saint, miracles which continue happening to this day. Saint Sharbel was beatified in 1965, and canonized on October 9th, 1977. I'd like to welcome Dr. Anne Borik to the Flowered Path. How are you doing tonight?
Good, thank you. Thank you for inviting me on.
Well, thank you for stopping by. I watched a YouTube video you did on Saint Sharbel, and it was fascinating. I knew very little bit about him, probably from other YouTube videos and stuff, but yours was a little bit of a deeper dive. And I watched a talk you gave, and somehow I got your contact information. I reached out to you, and I asked if you'd come on the Flowered Path and talk about Saint Sharbel, and you were gracious enough to do so. So I'd like to thank you for doing that. I guess we can start with, how did you find out about Saint Sharbel?
Saint Sharbel has really been part of our family ever since I could remember growing up. We were raised in the Maronite Catholic Church, and my grandmother actually had a great devotion to Saint Sharbel. In fact, one of her best friends was a Makhlouf, and his name was Joseph Makhlouf, from a very small town in Lebanon. And so this lady in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, which is where we grew up, was actually a relative of Saint Sharbel. So growing up, I remember, Aunt Sadie bringing the prayer cards just to pray for him to be beatified. He was canonized in 1977. Mm-hmm. And so as far as I can remember, he's been part of our family. It's just a beautiful devotion that we just want to share.
Just for those who don't know, can you speak just a little bit about the Maronite Catholic Church?
Yes. So, in the one Catholic Apostolic Church, there's many different rites. And so this is the rite that is from predominantly Lebanon, from the Middle East. It's one of the 24 rites founded by Saint Maron. The Maronites are very traditional. So we come from, the original church, if you will. Mm-hmm. And so we try to maintain the language that Jesus spoke. If you go to a Maronite divine liturgy, you'll hear the Aramaic language, which is the language that Jesus spoke. So
that's fascinating.
Yeah, and that's what Sharbel was. He was a Maronite priest, monk, and hermit. And nobody knew him. He lived in the mountains of Lebanon, and today he's known all over the world with really, some people say that he has probably the most miracles through the intercession of Saint Sharbel, God performing these miracles through this great saint more than any other to date. So, that says a lot.
That does. It's a wonderful claim. And some of the ones I've heard about are just stunning. So
yeah,
I guess we could talk a little bit about Saint Sharbel's life.
Yeah, so he died in 1898. He was born in 1828 in a very small village in Lebanon. And really, his father died when he was 3 years old. So he was raised by his mother, who was very devout Maronite, and two uncles who were in the monastery. And so as a little boy, Saint Sharbel began hearing the call, that internal voice, and he began to follow it. And if you go there today, and this is a beautiful thing, I was there in 2018. I took my mom, we went on a pilgrimage and visited his home in a place called Bakafara, which is a small village in the north. There's a little cave area that oftentimes you'll read about or you'll hear that little boy, Joseph Makhlouf, would go and pray. He loved the monastic feel. He had a little statue of the Blessed Mother, would oftentimes find a piece of incense, from the church, and he would just pray. He had a great devotion to the Blessed Mother, even as a little boy. In fact, we're told that the kids in the area at the time would make fun of him because they would call him the little saint. And so, as he grew up, he heard the call, and at the age of 21, he left everything behind, and he walked on foot to the monastery and never turned back. And when he joined the monastery, he became a priest, he was a monk. And then it's a beautiful story if you'd like to hear just, what really was the miracle that allowed the superior to allow him to enter into the hermitage, because he always wanted to go deeper. His heart was in the hermit place, which is even more of a ascetic type life.
He's living as a monk amongst the other monks, but he wants to, like you said, go further and kind of become a hermit.
Exactly. Yeah. And if you go there today, again, the monastery is in Anaya, Lebanon, and about a mile or so up the hillside is where the hermitage is. And so that's where he spent the remainder 23 years of his life, in that hermitage. Eventually, the superior did allow him permission to do that. But originally and early on, they didn't, because he was such a powerful instrument to have. For example, when the superior had a family member, for example, that was dying, they would call Father Sharbel to come pray at the bedside. And lo and behold, they would be cured. So even in his days of living as a priest, they knew that there was something different, that God had anointed him, and miracles were obviously being seen, in great numbers, even before he died.
Wow. So let's hear the story. It's a fascinating story. I know it, but I'd rather you tell it of, how the superior finally let him go be a hermit.
Yeah, it's called the miracle of the lamp. And so anybody that reads about Saint Sharbel, you'll see they have a logo, actually, that has the lamp, the oil lamp. Mm-hmm. And this is the story that comes from. So, one day that the superior asked him to review some records. And obedience was his number one virtue. He was very obedient. And so he asked some of the younger brothers to fill his oil lamp because he was going to be up, reviewing the files one night. And they played a joke on him. So they took it, and because he was so devout, he was easy to play jokes on, because he never was out of the mindset where his head and his mind was lifted to God. Mm-hmm. And he was always that way. And so whether he was working in the fields or whether he was eating or whatever he was doing, which he didn't eat much, the other brother monks, knew that. So they decided to fill the oil lamp with water. They kind of peeped through the hole. They were kind of watching. And lo and behold, when Father Sharbel lit it, it lit. And they just couldn't believe it. So they called the superior to come, and he took the lamp and tasted it, and it was water. And so the superior took that as a sign that, this is really something that is supernatural, that, that this is a man who God has completely taken over, and he allowed him to then enter into the hermitage. So that was a beautiful, beautiful miracle that was witnessed by his brother monks and the superior.
It's such a wonderful story.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
There's another story about some sort of, I think it was a pest that was affecting the crops.
Yes, that's correct. Mm-hmm. Yeah, again, they knew that he was a miracle worker. And so even to this day, you can look up, it's a historical fact that at that time in Lebanon, there was like pests that were infiltrating the land, the farmland. And it was so bad that they were going to lose all of their crops. And so again, they asked Father Sharbel to bless the water, and they sprinkled the water, and all of the area around in the hermitage, which is where they had their food grown, and none of it was touched. It was all healthy, beautiful farmland. And they attributed that to the holy water that Father Sharbel had blessed. So that was beautiful. There was another beautiful story about when they were out in the fields and there was a snake that came, and the other brothers were just beside themselves, and they called Father Sharbel to come, and he basically commanded the snake to turn around and leave. And he said, "There's nothing here for you." And that was it. So there's many, many stories like that really define his holiness. He was set apart. That's what it means to be holy. He truly was set apart, even from the other monks, in his day.
Mm-hmm. Just an aside, for those who aren't familiar, I think, we just have this idea of Lebanon being somewhere in the Middle East, but the landscape he was in was pretty mountainous, was it not?
Yes, very mountainous. In fact, it's about mile high. If you go there today in the wintertime, it's like they have lots of snow. It's about mile high. And, he lived there in a cell. He used a wooden log as a pillow. He lived a very life of asceticism and mortification. But what was really amazing was when he died, after he died on Christmas Eve. So it was in the midwinter. And the other monks who witnessed that, it was freezing cold. Father Sharbel never dressed differently in the summer or in the winter. He wore the same cloak, the same clothes. It was freezing, but that was part of the sacrifice, the suffering that he offered up to our Lord. Mm-hmm. And the reason he did it really, when you read about it and you hear stories, is his whole life he was intoxicated with God. They talk about being inebriated with God. The feelings and the comforts of this world just didn't make a difference to him, because he was so connected in that way.
Wow.
And he did it because he knew that Jesus suffered, and so he had that understanding, deep understanding that, how much he suffered for us, that this is nothing compared to what Jesus did for us. So it was at least that he can do. Mm-hmm. That's why he's a beautiful saint today. And, there's a story in Lebanon and amongst our family members and, people that are Lebanese that oftentimes say, Saint Sharbel suffered so much when he was living. Now that he's close to Jesus, no matter what he asks Jesus, he can't say no. Jesus will answer all of his prayers. And, there's some truth to that. I mean, it's a beautiful demonstration of holiness.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's what we get with the saints. You get these remarkable people who we can go to for intercession, and we're lucky for it. We're lucky we have their lives as examples. It's something to strive towards. I don't think I'll ever, get to that height, but hey, it's an inspiration. It's a complete inspiration. And I mean, that's why I'm doing this podcast. I read about these saints and I'm just like, wow, look what they did. Look what they did.
Right. And it changes us in it. But, with Saint Sharbel, we have a prayer group here, and we start, and there's just a lot of people around the globe that are joining and are interested in really the mission or the focus of being part of Saint Sharbel's prayer group is not necessarily to imitate him, although we do, but what's most important is imitating his love for the Eucharist and his love for Mary, because that's who defined him. And, so we use the chaplet as a beautiful devotion. And so if some of your listeners are not aware of the chaplet of Saint Sharbel, it's a great, beautiful prayer that is prayed on beads. It takes about maybe 6-7 minutes. It's a beautiful devotion to him.
Oh, yeah.
In growing in the virtues of Saint Sharbel, poverty, chastity, obedience, love for the Eucharist, and love for Mary. That's what it's all about.
Yeah, I actually am not familiar with it. I would love to have more information on that. We can go over that at another time.
Okay, great.
And there's links or anything, I can certainly get them in the show notes to the listeners.
Okay.
You mentioned about how little he ate. Now, I always find this fascinating. And this is, a few saints have this, where you wonder how they lived eating so little.
Right. Yeah, it's mind-boggling. As a medical physician, I mean, I can tell you all about metabolism and the need for caloric intake. And I mean, he worked in the field, but it comes from God. That's the only answer. It's something that is supernatural.
Yeah.
The Eucharist is what fed him.
Yeah.
The Eucharist was his nourishment, and the Eucharist was also his medicine. He died at the age of 70, and it's very interesting to hear about his death. In going there, talking to the monks personally, and hearing the stories. A lot of people think that, or you read about it and you hear that he collapsed. He had a stroke during the consecration. And he did. But what they believe, and the people closest to him that has been passed down, is that he was very healthy, robust. I mean, he worked in the fields, slept very little, ate very little. What they believe happened when he died on Christmas Eve in 1898, it was during the consecration while he was elevating the host. And they believe that it wasn't a stroke, but rather 8 days prior to that was when he collapsed. And so for 8 days, he, remained in this state and then finally died on Christmas Eve. So on December 17th, or whenever that day was that he collapsed, they believe that he was so engrossed or overtaken by the vision of God that he actually saw, God. And you can't live when you see the face of God, right?
Yeah.
So that's how holy he was. That's how close to our Lord this great saint was. And so that's the belief, that he collapsed, continued to pray those words. It's a prayer called the Father of Truth prayer. For 8 days, he would continually pray that prayer, which is part of the consecration, and it's part of the chaplet devotion that we pray. And then finally on Christmas Eve, he died. And then miracles immediately began.
Right. So
happening.
Sharbel's death, he's not a saint until, would you say, the mid-1970s? Is he finally?
Yeah, 1977. He was canonized.
Or canonized, yeah.
Yeah, he was canonized, yeah.
But before that, almost immediately after his death, these wondrous, strange things start happening around him.
That's right. That night in the hermitage, his body was in the chapel, and there was one other hermit that resided in that hermitage. There was a place for 3. And at one point he was alone, and then eventually there was another hermit. Well, he was praying in front of the Blessed Sacrament, and he witnessed a bright light from the tabernacle that kind of shone over Saint Sharbel's face that the night that he died.
Wow.
And from that time, it was a very humble burial, just like any other hermit. He was just or any other monk. He was buried in a box, just right on the hillside next to the monastery. Well, within days, a bright light began emanating from the grave, and people from the surrounding villages were witnessing it.
Yeah, I think I read that even some Islamic people had witnessed it.
Many people from the Muslim faith would come and were healed. Even today, even to this day, people from different faiths, Saint Sharbel is a wonder worker. I mean, he brings all together. And then, obviously in time they convert to Catholicism, but it takes time for that. But yeah, so people from all over were witnessing it, and people were being healed, and they had to actually exhume his body, and it was very warm, sweating, exuding like a water oil-like substance, and it never stopped for 50 plus years. I mean, it's incredible the number of years that his body would continually exude this oil, blood.
Now, there's only so much fluid in our body.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And so where does it come? How over years and years, a lot of the medical experts that documented it, and I've kind of gone through a few of them, because I actually had an opportunity to head up an investigation of a blind woman here in Phoenix that was completely healed. And so
through Saint Sharbel's intercession.
Through the intercession of Saint Sharbel, yes.
Amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, where does that come from? Well, I mean, there's only one explanation for that. And so, it's faith. And I oftentimes say, for those that have faith, no explanation is necessary. If you don't have faith, no explanation is possible. Right? That's a quote from, I believe, St. Jerome or something. But boy, it's amazing to hear these stories. It really opens your heart.
Yeah, whatever's this substance he was exuding, first of all, there was no foul smell.
That's right.
And it continued for a while. They stood him up essentially in a closet. People were so interested in seeing this, miracle worker. And whatever this fluid was, I believe it was like coming out from that area, like onto the floor. They put him out. We read a little something on him.
Oh, yeah.
They put him out in the sun to try to dry him out.
Yeah. Yes.
It just, nothing did it, It's just...
No, it would continue. They actually had to move him 4 different times. And again, if you go to the monastery today, behind one of the walls, the tomb is there that you can see. And the fluid has since, stopped by the grace of God. But the one wall that was there, is still there. The dirt that was in that area, people till today will take that dirt from the tomb area, from where his bodily fluids were, make tea, just a little bit, they'll boil it. And, there's reports of healings, especially during COVID. We would hear people from Lebanon that this was happening. And, it's God's power through the intercession of this great saint. So when you hear about sacred soil, I call it, but, people say dirt. If we can get dirt from Saint Sharbel's tomb, people are really, there's a lot of healings that are being documented and
absolutely
being seen.
Fascinating. As we mentioned, sometimes these are Catholics and sometimes these are non-Catholics.
That's right.
That are being healed.
Right.
Yeah. So you can't chalk it all up to just, some kind of psychosomatic, this person wanted to be healed because they were of the faith kind of thing.
That's right. Absolutely not. Yeah.
I might be wrong about this. Was he exhumed in the middle of the 1900s?
Yes, 1950.
And
initially the initial, when they exhumed his body was within like 45 days after he died because of the amount of fluid, the light, and they had to look at it. And then he was exhumed 4 other times.
Oh, okay.
But the last time was in 1950.
And was his body incorrupt at that point?
Yes. Yeah. It was.
Yeah. So in case anyone's not familiar, certain of these saints, it's amazing. Again, they do not rot, they do not decay in the way that you might expect any other living thing to. And there's no real explanation for it. some people say, oh, it's where they were buried and it's this and that. But the others around them aren't incorrupt. It's an absolutely fascinating thing. It doesn't happen with every saint, but there are a few.
Right.
People just look at it and say, I don't know how that happens.
Right. It's incredible. Padre Pio, Maria Goretti, Saint Bernadette, from Lourdes is like she's sleeping. She's considered the sleeping saint. So yes, there's several. And I think, in the scripture tells us that our body is the temple of the Holy Spirit, right? It makes it, when you reach that peak holiness, it's a gift. It really is. It's a gift that God allows, that, he was so pure in his mind and in his heart and in his body, right? Mm-hmm. Poverty, chastity, obedience, that it's a gift that God allows some to be preserved. And, the other thing that's amazing is that there's many stories of people saying that they felt Saint Sharbel. Well, the girl that was blind, I can tell you that story, but she felt a hand, somebody standing next to her. There's several. One in particular, a friend of my mom, who needed a liver transplant and to this day is completely cured, got the liver, but says that the little monk, would appear to him in his hospital room.
Wow.
And so, that's kind of a unique little kind of tidbit about this Saint Sharbel.
Yeah, from everything I hear, the miracles keep coming. It's incredible. Right. It's absolutely incredible.
It is. In Lebanon, the 22nd is a very special day. So if your listeners are, kind of interested in Saint Sharbel, tune in the 22nd, pray that day around the world. Graces are bestowed because he appeared to he healed a lady there, and he said to her, come on the 22nd, go to Mass and share the faith with people. And to this day, there's literally thousands of people that go in pilgrimage from the 21st into the 22nd, because it happened on the 22nd. 30 years ago, it was in 1993 when he appeared and completely cured this lady of a massive stroke.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it continues. And on the 22nd, many people will leave their canes or leave their crutches and, just, get up out of the wheelchair and just walk home today, now.
That's
last
fantastic.
month, and it's going to happen this month. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's beautiful.
Yeah, it really is. Do you know the story? So there's a particular story about how we know what Saint Sharbel looks like.
Yes, I do. In fact, I personally know a relative of the photographer.
Oh, fantastic.
Yes. So that's right. There's no picture of Saint Sharbel, first of all. So the image that we see, it is a miraculous image. So the story goes that it was around 1950. There was 6 seminarians from the United States that went to Anaya to make a pilgrimage. And they were there. One of them had a camera. They took a picture of them right in front, on the hillside in front of his hermitage. And when they developed it, there was this 6th person that showed up, and that's Saint Sharbel. And so they took that image and they used that as the icon, as the image that we now know. Anybody that reads about Saint Sharbel or knows about, there's not many pictures of him. There's only the one image that we recognize, right? There may be one that maybe he's kneeling in a posture similar to Saint Maron, or to one of the other Saint Namdallah, which was his teacher, who's now a saint. But that's the image. Is that what the story you're talking about?
Yes. Yep. That's it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes. He appeared on this photograph.
That's right. And what they did when he was canonized in 1977, that was how they had a picture during the canonization. They took it from that photo.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And we had a beautiful, it was a NAM convention. It was the National the Apostolate of Maronites in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, which is my hometown. And they unveiled that photo, at that time, at that convention in 1977. So that was a big deal. It was beautiful.
I mean, one of many amazing stories that go around about this wonderful saint. If I'm remembering correctly, there was someone who was a very, very old monk still around in 1950 who was able to recognize it and say, that's him.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
That's right. Otherwise, they would not, they knew who Saint Sharbel, who Father Sharbel was, because by then I mean, they had opened the cause, for beatification.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why they made the pilgrimage there. But you're absolutely right. It's amazing. Even like today, there's still a living relative in the United States, a distant relative of the Makhlouf family, of Saint Sharbel. And I think that's just beautiful.
It is, because the wonderful thing about saints is that they're people, and
Right.
every one of us has the opportunity to be one as well. Now,
Exactly.
hopefully we get there.
Mm-hmm.
Who knows? But that opportunity is there, and the fact that there's relatives around, and in this case, at least back in 1950, there was somebody alive who knew him still.
Right.
These are wonderful things, because it just drives that home, I think, a little bit more. Like, these were real people. These are not folk heroes.
Exactly.
They were real people that did amazing things, and their intercession is still doing amazing things for people.
Right. Did amazing things in like a 4x4, place he never traveled outside of Lebanon.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's what's pretty fascinating. Nobody knew who he was.
Mm-hmm.
But today, obviously everybody, and more people are coming to know him, especially in the Roman Catholic, church.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I've grew up in Roman Catholic, so
Right.
there's a certain saints I'm very familiar with, and others, especially since I'm starting this podcast, I'm getting more familiar with different ones. But until recently, I just wasn't that aware of them. In fact, I was at the Lourdes Shrine in Emmitsburg, Maryland recently, before I knew about Saint Sharbel. And I only found out now that they have a shrine to him there with a first-class relic.
Isn't that awesome?
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
So I need to go back. Luckily it's not that far away. It's about an hour drive for me, so I can go back and visit. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I was amazed. So the word is getting out there.
It is getting out. It's getting out there in a big way. Mm-hmm. More than we really, really think. But you reminded me of something that a lot of the Maronites, adopt in their practice, in their prayer practice, and that is they make a promise. It's called a nidin. So like if you're asking God through the intercession of this great saint, you ask Saint Sharbel, please pray for this particular, reason, healing, mm-hmm. whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And you make a promise and you say, when God answers this prayer, I will light a candle, or I will make a pilgrimage to Emmitsburg, or whatever it is. That's a great prayer practice that a lot of Maronites have adopted and do. Mm-hmm. And that's why there's so many that pilgrimage there and go there to give thanks for the miracles that are answered. One thing that really amazed me, I love videography and photography and all of that. And so when we were in Anaya, we were there over the 22nd. Obviously there was, many, many people there, but I just kind of went wandering around and I found myself in an area that was a TV studio, and they were getting ready. They have a place dedicated just for people to capture their testimonies, their witnesses. When it's amazing. The day I was there, there was a father that had a little girl who had been healed, and they came to record it, and they just to capture, because there's so many, and it's just one way that they can document all of the testimonies and all of that that's happening.
Wow.
Yeah. So I thought that was neat.
Yeah. The fact that it's ongoing and there's so many is just, it's stunning.
Right.
So can you share some examples of some of these that you've witnessed or know of? You mentioned the blind woman that was cured. That's stunning.
Absolutely. Yeah. The first one that I ever experienced was with my grandfather. And, I always tell the story because it really changed me, because I was at an age, I was, probably in high school, maybe grade school, high school. My grandfather had severe migraine headaches. For 20 plus years, and he would bang his head against the wall. That's how bad the pain was. And I remember my grandmother had a great devotion to Saint Sharbel, to our Blessed Mother. Well, one day he grabbed a little relic that she had sitting on the table, and he screamed, and he grabbed it, touched his head with it, and said, in Arabic, he said, "God, heal me. Saint Sharbel, please pray for me that this pain go away." And he never had a headache again. I mean, that was it. That was kind of the last time that we ever witnessed him having headaches.
Wow.
So that was like a personal kind of,
yeah.
And then, as a professional, I did have an opportunity to do an investigation on a huge miracle here in Phoenix in 2016. Do you want to hear the story?
Absolutely, please. Yeah.
So in 2016, they brought the relics to the United States because it was like the 50-year beatification. So there was a celebration, and it happened to come to our Maronite church here in Phoenix. And this girl, 31 years old, who knew nothing about Saint Sharbel. A lot of the Mexican people in Mexico, they have a great devotion now to Saint Sharbel. Well, a little boy had been healed of blindness in Mexico. And I guess, somehow this girl's sister-in-law heard about it. So they decided to bring the woman to the church, begging God for a healing, because she was on many meds. She had seizures and a whole bunch of things. She was going to be placed in a nursing home because she couldn't care for her 3 children. Mm-hmm. So she walked in and went to confession and basically begged God through Saint Sharbel's intercession to heal her. But she knew nothing. She didn't know who Saint Sharbel was. And Father Wassam, blessed her eyes with the holy oil. And as they were there, if you talk to her, she says that she felt like there was somebody standing next to her with their hand on her shoulder, but there was nobody there. To make a long story short, she went home. That night, she began developing pain in her eyes, and then went to her ophthalmologist. Within 48 hours, her vision was completely restored back to normal. And so, she called the church and she said, something happened. And so immediately he, contacted me, and we got a group of medical doctors to really, scrutinize this case. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. She had the diagnosis was intracranial hypertension. She had a disease where the pressure in the brain was very high. It's called pseudotumor cerebri. And the pressure obliterated the optic nerves, so she couldn't see, mm-hmm. right? She wasn't born blind, but this had, it was an irreversible blindness. So her vision, was restored completely back to normal. That night, her husband said that he smelled something like burnt meat. Like 4 o'clock in the morning, she woke up with severe pain in her eyes, and then that's what happened.
That kind of. So I have MS. The way I got my diagnosis is I went temporarily, thankfully, blind in my left eye.
Okay.
And that was the same thing. It was that optic nerve kind of thing.
Right.
And it thankfully came back. And, I probably got about 90+% of my vision back, which is good.
Excellent.
But yeah, that's.
Yeah, the pathophysiology of MS is different than what we're talking about. The pseudotumor, because this is the pressure. It's like a physical pressure that compresses the nerve and it causes it to die, basically.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. Yeah.
You see,
but before that moment, I never experienced eye pain before, though. So when she said because I thought you can't eye pain know, but you can experience eye pain. I had it.
You can't, right? Especially when the nerve wakes up.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. And so that was a beautiful. And she's doing. I mean, her vision is 20/20. She's off all medicine. Yeah.
Amazing. That is wonderful.
Yeah.
So sometimes you will see Saint Sharbel's name with an SH and sometimes with a CH.
Right.
Is there a preferred spelling? Is one, the traditional spelling? Is one, anglicized? What's the difference?
Honestly, as far as I know, I don't think there's a difference. The only thing that I can figure out is that the CH is kind of like French is a language in Lebanon. It's one of the languages. Okay. But I have a novena that I brought back from there. I mean, in even the original documents, like the prayer for beatification, it's spelled with an S. Mm-hmm. So I tend to keep the S. I think the CH is a newer kind of version of spelling it.
Okay.
But, both are fine. Both are accepted. And so that's, as far as I know, that would be my answer for that. Because I've seen it both ways. as I'm sure you have, but even early on, I think S is the original.
Okay. People can visit the monastery to this day?
Absolutely. In Lebanon, it's in the north area. People fly into Beirut, and maybe within probably less than an hour drive, you can get to that place. We have a shrine here in Phoenix as well. Here in Arizona, we have a first-class relic, and so people come from many different places around the country to come to the shrine here, especially since that healing happened. So that's a beautiful thing. But most Maronite churches around the country have a first-class relic of Saint Sharbel.
Oh, isn't that fascinating?
Probably all of them. Yeah. That's one thing. There's there's many relics that are around of this great saint.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's another added benefit to knowing him and having a devotion to him.
If someone wants to participate or get involved with one of these prayer groups, how would they go about it?
Yes, there's a website, and you just kind of sign up, and it's C or S, so it's sharbelprayernet.org. And if you just go to that, it takes you just to one page. It'll explain it, all of the different countries of people that are part of it, and really they're all people that I've personally connected with. So it's a very secure, beautiful prayer group that's growing. We have people in Africa, Indonesia, Canada, Philippines, China. I mean, it's amazing to me. And we just want to keep growing it. And in that, we have what's called a prayer link, to be linked with somebody for 21 days where you pray for them, they pray for you. And it's that kind of a personal growing in devotion, asking Saint Sharbel's devotion, intercession. Mm-hmm. So that's, we'd love for anybody and everybody to join that is interested in growing in devotion to the Eucharist and our Blessed Mother through Saint Sharbel's intercession. That's really what we want to grow. And again, using the chaplet as a beautiful prayer devotion. The rosary obviously is, you can't be on the team and not pray the rosary, right?
Sure. Yeah.
But the chaplet of Saint Sharbel is made up of Our Father, 3 Hail Marys, and 5 sets of that. And then the Father of Truth prayer, which is the prayer that I told you that Saint Sharbel continued to say after he collapsed for 8 days. And that's a prayer that is to the Father. Father of Truth, behold your Son, a sacrifice pleasing to you. So it's about, offering the sacrifice of our Lord to the Father. So it's during the consecration, which is what our Mass is, a sacrifice.
Right. Yes.
And then the prayer to obtain graces is the miracle prayer. I mean, this is a powerful, beautiful prayer that at the end of the chaplet, you pray, and in it is where you insert your special intention, asking God through the intercession of Saint Sharbel to hear our prayers, to heal, to change, to convert, to, whatever it is. Yeah, it's simple, but it's powerful.
Mm-hmm. There's certain saints that I think sort of sing to people for whatever reason. Padre Pio is one of them. I think Sharbel's another one. I believe I mentioned when I first contacted you, I didn't know that much about him, and it just immediately, I was like, oh, there's something here. Like, it just sang to me. That's all, the only way I can put it.
I can't tell you how many people I hear that from. I mean, it's amazing that you're saying that, because I think he chooses us rather than us choose the saints. And so there's no doubt in my mind that Saint Sharbel is wanting to, be in your life, and people that feel that. There's no doubt about it.
It was wonderful.
Yeah. 100% of the time, the prayers are answered. I mean, our prayers don't go unanswered at all, especially through the intercession of this great saint, Padre Pio, and Saint Anthony of Padua. When we were talking to a monk in Lebanon, he was talking about the days, the time that we're living in. And he said, these are the times, there's 3 saints that he believes that are very, very active in helping us grow closer to God. And that would be Padre Pio, Saint Sharbel, and Saint Anthony of Padua. Wow. Now, the little flower we can't forget, right? I mean, because Saint Sharbel's been, considered the male counterpart of Saint Therese of Lisieux because of the miracles. But that's what he said, and I'll never forget that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, without knowing that much, I just, for what it's worth, I got Padre Pio kind of vibes from Saint Sharbel before knowing that
Yeah.
much about him. I just,
Yeah.
it's all I could say. It's just like this, there's something here.
Yeah. So we're being called to go deeper.
Hmm.
And that's what, I teach catechism, and I tell the kids, at the Maronite church, that it's great to know about them and, learn about them, but, but really go deeper,
Hmm.
kind of imitate them, and he'll show up. I mean, 100% of the time.
Hmm.
Yeah. It's powerful.
To take a step back, and I'm just curious because, again, Roman Rite, so
Hmm.
it's different for me. So when you say that there's Aramaic spoken, is it, for instance, like when we do the Latin Mass, that it's a combination of Aramaic, or is the whole service in Aramaic?
Well, no, the whole service is a little bit different.
Hmm.
So the timing of the Our Father's different, and the pieces given different, and all that. But the consecration,
Hmm.
when the priest is, consecrating the host and elevating the host, those words spoken, they're the same words. This is my body,
Right, right.
it's the same words that we use in the Roman, right? But they speak it in the Aramaic language. And that's really powerful to hear, because that is the language that's the language Saint Sharbel. I mean, he, Arabic and Aramaic,
Hmm.
but that's the language Jesus spoke.
Yeah, yeah.
But it is the exact same words. It's not a different version of the consecration, if
Right.
that's what you're asking. Right.
Just wondering, like how much of the service is in Aramaic
Oh, well,
versus.
it depends on the priest.
Hmm.
There's some priests that will do like in English. I mean, in English, probably most of the Mass can be done in English, except for, that the highlights of the certain prayers that are in Aramaic. And then, some you'll find the whole Mass is in. Our priest here, it's in English, Aramaic, and Spanish, because there's a big Spanish population now that has come since the miracle.
Hmm. That makes
And
sense.
so, yeah, so
Yeah.
that's beautiful. And then and the music that you hear is very typical of the chanting that is in the Maronite, right? That
Hmm.
that Saint Sharbel would have heard. You know what I mean? It's and they're all chants and prayers invoking our Blessed Mother. Talking about it's so powerful and so deep. The interpretation of a lot of the hymns.
Yeah, I'm wondering if there's a Maronite church nearby. I would love to just visit.
Yeah, yeah, you definitely should. Definitely, because you'll grow richer in appreciation of him, as you are. I mean,
Hmm.
and that's what most people, who are listening, that's a great way to learn. You can even go online, there's some masses and
Sure.
so
Yeah.
forth.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't think about that. Absolutely. And likewise, your talks are on YouTube. At least one
Yeah.
of them is. I think I saw a
Mhm.
second as well.
Yeah, we have a whole channel dedicated to it's called Prayer Motion. So we have I live stream the Mass on the 18th every month.
Okay.
um, and we do it on the 18th because that's the day that Daphne was healed of blindness, and it kind of mimics in Lebanon they do it on the 22nd.
Hmm. Hmm.
So we have a beautiful healing Mass on that day. Yeah, there's just a lot. It's all about Saint Charbel. A lot of different talks and different things. So if anybody's interested, you can always find something like that.
That's your channel on YouTube?
Yes, that's right.
What's it called one more time?
It's called Prayer Motion.
Okay.
Prayer Motion. Yeah, and I can just Google Saint Sharbel talk or my name. Sometimes it comes up. Father Wassam Akiki is our pastor. A lot of his sermons or masses are on there.
Hmm. I encourage people to dig deeper. There's so many miracles attributed to this saint that we could probably do a whole other show or
Yeah,
more, probably, well,
right.
easily more, but just talking about the miracles, they're absolutely fascinating. This saint Charbel is fascinating in general. I mean, remove the miracles, he had an incredibly fascinating life, but when you add those into it, you just get this wonderful picture of
Yeah,
of this saint that is still working, still interceding for people.
that's right. Over 30,000 to date. And just personally, you asked the personal, there was a beautiful healing that I personally experienced through the oil that I brought back from his tomb. Just briefly, there was a little baby. Friend of mine had a
Oh,
baby.
yes, you said this in the talk. Yes, please tell the
Yeah,
story. Yes.
yeah. When I think about it, it blows my mind. And it gives you the power that we have access to through prayer and faith. And so just, the baby was born with a umbilical wrapped around her neck. And so she had a paralyzed vocal cord. And the vocal cord didn't allow it to close, so she was aspirating, and they couldn't feed her, and they had a tube in her nose, and all of that. Days old, 2, 3. So they shipped her to the pediatric intensive care and all of that. So I ended up having to fly into Pittsburgh like a day or two later, and I brought with me the oil that I brought back from Anaya. We have a great devotion. As soon as I heard that, I began a day and night prayer vigil asking Saint Sharbel to heal this little girl. Now, what's amazing is that, I don't understand why. I think God just put that on me. It wasn't like it wasn't my baby. I was concerned, but it just really overtook me,
Mm-hmm.
in a way that is just not normal. But anyway, so I went directly to the hospital, and the mom was holding the baby, and I just brought a Q-tip of the oil. Now, I had been praying the whole time, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And just kind of made a little cross on her forehead, and she choked 3 times. It really scared me. Now, I'm a medical doc, but it scared me, right?
Right, yeah.
And then the mom said, no, it's okay. She's okay. And then I left. I just started praying the Our Father, but I was nervous, right? And
Mm-hmm.
and I just felt, I felt the Holy Spirit was there, but I wasn't sure what to do or say, but God showed up, and he did it. It's not me, right?
Right.
And so that next day, the baby, they did a barium study. She was scheduled to have a test done to see. She passed it. They took the tube out. She went home 2 days later.
Stunning.
And this baby now, is eating ice cream. She's completely normal. And I said to her mom, later, and I captured all the texts, and I actually put it into a little book. I captured everything. I documented and journaled it all so that the baby someday will read it and know what happened,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
So I said, Jenna, do you remember the baby cough? She said, absolutely. She said, that was the last time she choked.
Amazing.
And in the text, she said, my mom and I say that, Saint Sharbel, your prayers, we thank you, that this is absolutely a miracle. And so, yeah, it's powerful.
As, a medical doctor, when you encounter medical miracles,
Yeah,
what does that do to you?
there's no words to describe what that feels like or what that is, because in my heart, I'm a believer. So,
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, I have faith, and it doesn't take a whole lot of evidence. But what it does is it gives me a tool, and it allows me to use that as an instrument to bring hope to other people that don't have access to it.
Mm.
And that, I can't tell you how many people and patients today that really just don't have hope. If they're not believers, if they're not followers of Jesus, they have nothing. Really, there's nothing to hold on to. And so as a medical doc, I want to heal them. I want them to get better, not only in their physical body, but emotionally
Sure.
and spiritually. And so these are the kind of things that, that are great examples. And then when I see it, it feeds my soul. You know what I mean? Not that we need it, but honestly, it does.
Mm-hmm.
It lifts us up.
Does it get less amazing each time?
Never.
Yeah,
No. And
I would imagine not. Yeah.
Yeah, for me, it doesn't. And I often say that, when you talk to some of the Lebanese people, my family and people, and you tell them about Saint Sharbel doing a miracle, a lot of them are like, yeah, what else is new? That's what he does. And I just can't understand that. I just want to jump on the rooftops and, yell, because it never gets old. It's just beautiful.
I often feel bad for people who don't get to experience these things because they don't have that sort of, testament of faith,
And, as a medical doc, I'm not shy about praying at the bedside. We need to do that, if we believe it. And I can't tell you, I've never had anybody refuse, regardless of what their background or prayer is, when they're in need, physically, emotionally, pain, there's a little glimmer that opens up. And so as a medical doctor, you're not going to find many that do that.
Right.
But I think that it can make a big difference if you do. And that's what I found.
Yeah.
In practice and in my career.
Dr. Ann Borik, thank you so much for talking with us about Saint Sharbel.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure. It's my favorite topic.
Well, maybe we'll have more to talk about at some point. We can have you come back and talk some more.
I would love it.
All right.
I would love it.
Thank you so much. I hope to put more content together regarding Saint Sharbel for the Flowered Path patrons upcoming. There are many stories to tell. The prayer community Dr. Ann Borik mentioned can be found at sharbelprayernet.org. Her YouTube channel is Prayer Motion. I'd like to thank my new patrons, Joseph Santamaria, Lucinda Morel, and I'd also like to thank John Gigliotti and Kathleen Rollins for their donations. Patrons and donations help me keep making the Flowered Path and bringing you more content. All patrons get the regular episodes of the Flowered Path ad-free, often before they drop on the regular podcast feed. Rose and Orchid tier patrons also get shout-outs on the show. Orchid tier patrons get monthly merch mailings. To check out all of the patron options and benefits, and to help me continue to make the Flowered Path, go to patreon.com/thefloweredpath. You can also find a PayPal link. If you want to make a one-time donation, just click the support button at thefloweredpath.com and look for the PayPal button that says donate. Sources for this episode and the news segment can be found in the show notes for this episode at thefloweredpath.com. Please like and subscribe to The Flowered Path wherever you are listening. If you are inclined to leave a nice review, that will help as well. The Flowered Path is on YouTube, so please subscribe to our channel there. And no matter where you listen, if you like what you hear, please share the episodes on social media. You can find The Flowered Path on Facebook, facebook.com/thefloweredpath, on Instagram @thefloweredpath, and on the web at thefloweredpath.com.